Hi, Senator. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. You've got a full dose of Minnesota this morning.
Yeah, we have a lot of Minnesota. It's great. It's a great state. So we asked Senator Klobuchar this question as well, and we're wondering if you can give us any insight into the potential for a shutdown and what you're planning to do, what your Democratic colleagues are planning to do today.
Yeah, well, so we're in a really terrible position, I just have to say. I think that the Democrats believe that what we should do is to finish the negotiations that are well on their way and nearly completed, to pass a short-term CR so we can finish the negotiations. And so I think you're not going to see Democrats voting right now for this long-term CR. I think it's a little bit of a misnomer because people are thinking that it basically is a continuation of the current budget for the rest of this fiscal year, when in fact it's not that at all. It shifts money around. It actually hands huge power to President Trump and the Doge guys to do what they want to do within the next several months. And that just seems to me to be a huge risk for Minnesota as we go forward. So what ought to happen is that I think we're very interested in getting a vote on a short-term CR so that the folks that make these appropriations decisions can pass these bipartisan bills, and we'll see how this plays out over the next couple of days. No Democrat wants a shutdown. Shutdowns are also really, really bad. But we're in exceptional times and a very challenging moment, and I think that it's important also that Congress, steps up and does the job that we're elected by our representatives, by our constituents to do. So we'll see what happens over the next several days. I wish I had more definitive answers for everybody.
So it sounds like you're planning to vote no.
I will be voting no on the CR if it comes up, and I really want to see a vote on the short-term patch so that we can finish negotiations.
So you mentioned Doge already. I'm wondering what you're making of the Trump administration and Doge's initiatives on cutting federal spending. We reported this week that they slashed 2 programs that helped schools and food banks and child care facilities buy food from local farms, building up those supply chains. Those programs were cut. How are you seeing the cut of those programs impacting your state, Minnesota farmers?
Well, so over the last 10 years or so, we have done so much good work at the federal level and also at the state level to kind of build connections between local producers and schools in their communities so that kids can have healthy foods and local producers can have markets for the food that they're producing. This has been highly successful, and you've seen schools reinvest in kitchens so that they can cook food. And I visited schools in Minnesota where you can see like little elementary school kids going through the line and being able to pick food that was grown within just a couple of miles of their schools. And it's really worked. So I think what they're doing is completely wrong. I think it runs counter to the intentions of Congress and what we have passed. And I also think that honestly, I don't really believe that Elon Musk or the Doge guys that are in there really have any idea like what they're doing or what the what the impact is of the decisions that they're making. They're not going in with with great care and saying, we've evaluated this, we don't think it's working, we want to get rid of it. This is working and we want to keep it. It's just sort of an across the board. And I believe that this is a great example of a step that is going to be hurting the health of kids in schools and hurting producers in Minnesota and around the country, and we shouldn't be doing it.
So, as a lawmaker, how are you, chatting with your colleagues, talking about how to push back on some of these cuts? There were lease terminations for local offices, like for the Farm Service Agency, staffing cuts we've already discussed. How are you chatting with your colleagues about pushing back on this?
Well, I heard you talking with Senator Klobuchar before I came on about the ways in which Doge and the Trump team are going into the USDA and cutting FSA staff and NRCS staff. These are the folks that are helping producers in Minnesota and around the country figure out how to get their applications completed for farm credit and helping them navigate how to install their latest irrigation system and deploy their EQIP and CSP grants. And farmers count on them. And it's interesting because in a bipartisan way, I worked on this with Senator Ricketts, we identified that there was a real shortage of staff in local regional FSA offices. We were hearing about this from Minnesota producers and people around the country. And so we actually went to the USDA last year and said, let's take a look at this and see what we need to do. And they said, yes, absolutely. We need to do a better job of bringing people into this field because there is a shortage, lots of retirements. And so here's what happens. Now we've got all of these probationary folks fired. And as Amy said, these are people that have just gone through a whole bunch of training in some cases so that they're ready to do the job, and then they're lost. And meanwhile, somebody else that they were going to replace is about to retire, and it creates this bad situation. What's honestly frustrating for me is that I know a lot of my Republican colleagues will sort of say, yeah, this isn't good, we need to do something about this, but this is a moment where people have to say that in public and not only kind of behind the scenes, but they need to say that in front of the scenes. And I think I get it. I think there's a lot of intimidation that's happening, but this is a moment where I think we need to really be speaking out.
So on that point, you have, not to belabor this comment, but people are talking about it, you said you're on the side of workers, not billionaire asshole bosses like Musk. Do you stand,
I did say that.
You did. Do you stand by that comment still? And is there anything you'd like to add about what that looks like in action?
Well, so I said that in response to this, tell me the 5 things you did to justify your existence last week email that Musk sent out a couple of weeks ago. And I was tapping into something I would guess that many people in this room have experienced at one time or another. You had a bad boss who basically treated you like you didn't get your job done and disrespected you. And I think one of the reasons what I said tapped such a nerve with people is because people, folks could just relate to that. And I continue to see sort of an arrogance and a disregard for the work that folks do. And understand, even before I was an elected person, I've been very committed to figuring out how can we make government work better? How can we make it provide better services? How can we do it in a way that is more efficient? How can we make sure that federal civil servants have better technology so that they can be more efficient? I'm all in favor of that. Let's work on that together. But what's happening here is just sort of this blatant disregard for the work of folks, and I remain just as annoyed about it as I was when I wrote that tweet. My mother swore a lot too, so I think maybe I come by it. Honestly.
So switching gears here a little bit, egg prices are obviously really top of mind for most people, including me. And I want to talk a little bit about the bird flu pandemic. So former CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield recently told Politico that he predicts the avian flu will be a major pandemic. Do you agree? And what are you doing to kind of combat this or work with USDA to slow the spread?
Well, so the avian influenza is very concerning. Of course, it has just been devastating to poultry producers. I think over 100 million birds culled nationally. It is very concerning that the virus has jumped from birds to dairy cows and also to humans. And so it has all of the makings. I understand why Dr. Redfield is so concerned about this, and I am as well. It has all of the makings of a very dangerous situation. Okay, so what should we be doing in this situation? What lessons have we learned? We know that we need to be on top of the research. We need to be looking very carefully about the animal-human interactions and what we can do about that. We should not be defunding or firing the people that are doing that work. We need to be supporting them in all the ways that we can. We should be continuing our work into looking at vaccinations and other treatments. We should be on top of the work around surveillance. We've made huge progress since the original avian influenza outbreak in 2015 on improving biosurveillance and also in making sure that the virus isn't accidentally tromped in and out of barns by people that are working there. And all of that work is really, we've learned a lot. We're getting much, much better at it. So this sort of firing, accidentally, I guess, of the folks that were working on that, and then trying to bring them back in creates a level of chaos and uncertainty that is the last thing that we need in this moment. And so I think we should all be paying a lot of attention to this, and we should be supporting in all the ways that we can the scientists and the researchers and also the inspectors that are trying to keep us all safe.
So I also want to ask you a little bit about tariffs. That's very top of mind for farmers, ranchers, most people in the food supply chain. These newly announced Chinese tariffs will include a levy of 15% on U.S. products like chicken, wheat, and corn, as well as 10% on soybeans, pork, beef, fruit. Let's focus on soybeans. That's a big crop in Minnesota. What impact are you expecting to see for your state's exports, and how are you working to address those concerns with farmers?
Well, so I start from the place that we need fair access to markets for American products, including ag products. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that we do not have fair access to markets for many of our products. And there are we need to address that. And I actually am one who thinks that in some cases, if you're being targeted, tariffs are a way to accomplish that. I mean, for example, when President Trump was in office the last time, he negotiated the USMCA agreement, which was, I think important improvements on the old NAFTA agreement. Right now, Minnesota dairy has trouble and some product lines getting access to Canadian markets, and we should fix that. That's not fair. But what is happening right now with this across-the-board tariff strategy, which is on again and off again, it is driving Minnesota producers nuts because they don't know where they're going to be able to sell their products. They don't know what the price is going to be. They don't understand the theory or the philosophy behind it. And I mean, let's understand, these are, for the most part, these are farms and farmers and farm families that are already really struggling to make it work. I mean, most farms in this country and in Minnesota are not breaking even just on farm income. That's why so many folks are working off the farm to pay for health insurance or to make sure that there's a little bit of extra income. So it is a hard time. And like input costs are up, farm income is down, and then you layer on top of that the uncertainty of all of these tariffs, and it is like people are literally coming into my office and saying, I don't think I can do this anymore, Tina. Like I'm giving up the ghost. And that's a really worrisome thing if you care about food security, if you care about national security, if you care about the health of rural economies, if you want the United States to be a place that's growing things. So the base level of uncertainty that always exists in agriculture, you layer on top of it what the president is doing with Trump, with tariffs, and it's devastating.
So to talk a little bit about the flip side of that, the Minnesota State Agriculture Department co-hosted an event last week called Ag for All, focused on transforming barriers into breakthroughs. And I'm curious what you think, what policies work to incentivize young people or new and beginning farmers to get into this. You mentioned there's a lot of challenges. There's land access, there's tariffs, there's uncertainty. What policies do you think work at the national level?
Well, so not to be just Debbie Downer here, or Tina Downer here, but there are so many people who really want to get into agriculture and get into food. Some folks who, like, it has been in their family for generations, and some folks that are, immigrating to the United States from other countries and come from a farm background and want to be able to be a producer in this country. And then some young people who, graduating from the University of Minnesota Ag program and want to do it. So it's exciting to see that energy. What we need to do is to address some of the structural disadvantages that make it so hard for people to get into farming. Okay, one of them, as you say, is land access. So I'm working on legislation to figure out how can you create some tax incentives or other incentives to make land more affordable for people. That's really hard because, it's expensive. The other thing that we can do, and I'd like to see this happen in the Farm Bill, is to address how some of the risk management programs work so they work better for folks that are just getting started. If you're going in to get your working capital loan and you don't have crop insurance, you can't get a loan and you can't even get started. But it's really hard for young producers to get crop insurance. So how can we fix that? How can we make the whole farm insurance program work better? Because a lot of younger producers want to grow a variety of crops, and it doesn't work as well for them. So I think there are some specific things that we can do to make it easier for folks.
So one last question before we let you go. You're not seeking re-election. In your retirement announcement, you said our country is in need of a strong progressive leadership right now, maybe more than ever. What do you think your party needs to do? Who's next up? Who's catching your eye?
Yeah, well, so it was a hard decision for me to make, but in this role, I was thinking about how do I want to spend the next 10 years of my life, and it's unusual in most jobs to sort of make a commitment that's an 8-year commitment. And so I feel very good about the personal decision that I made, but one of the reasons it was easy to make in some ways was I can see that there's a strong bench of talent in Minnesota, and I won't, it's not my job to pick my successor, it's the folks, those people's jobs to go out and win the support, and Minnesotans' job to figure it out, but we have some good, strong candidates, and I'll leave that decision to the good people of Minnesota.
Well, thank you, Senator. That's all the time we have.
Thank you so much.
Really
I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.